kommunistische Organisation. Podcast.
Welcome to a new episode of our podcast. Today that is Max and my comrade Paul, again have a very special guest with us, Aleksandar Djenic, the executive secretary of the new Communist Party of Yugoslavia. Welcome to our show. Great to have you here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
And also welcome, Paul.
Hello.
So, the new Communist Party of Yugoslavia recently celebrated its 33rd birthday, if I'm correct, and is active with focus in Serbia. It opposes the imperialist policies of US-led NATO and the EU. It also is active in the World Anti-Imperialist Platform, which was formed in the wake of NATO's war against Russia, with the aim of unifying the anti-NATO forces internationally. With Aleksandar, we want to talk about current developments in Serbia and the region of the former Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, to discuss and better understand their historical background and their relation to the current dynamics of imperialism. The peoples of Yugoslavia, of course, brutally experienced and continue to experience the aggressive imperialist policy of divide and rule. Germany, in that, pioneered the policy of fragmentation in the Balkans in the early 1990s. Until today, German imperialism is economically, militarily, and politically in a leading position to actively enforce its interest in the region. The Bundeswehr has been participating in NATO's KFOR mission since 1999, occupying Kosovo, the longest deployment in Bundeswehr history. The German CSU politician Christian Schmidt has been so-called High Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina since May 2021, officially to oversee the 1995 Dayton Peace Agreement. In fact, his role gives him far-reaching powers to legislate and to fill state offices. Control over the region is thus sensitively backed up. The German Institute for International and Security Affairs, in German it is Stiftung Wissenschaft und Politik, one of the most influential foreign and security policy think tanks in Germany, recently noted, and I quote now, that the geostrategic competition for influence in the Western Balkans is growing. Actors such as Russia, China and Turkey, but also the US, are expanding their presence in the region, exploiting economic ties, foreign and security cooperation, and also political vectors of influence and corruption to strengthen their position in the region against the EU. In light of Russia's war of aggression, that's what they say, I have to explain maybe, in light of Russia's war against Ukraine, geostrategic competition in the Western Balkans has continued to increase as the EU struggles to revive accession processes. End of quote. From the point of view of the EU and NATO, the link between Serbia and Russia must further be cut, whereas the forces tending to the west must be strengthened. And yet, the borders in the Balkans, held by force, are fragile. Most recently, the ongoing conflicts in Kosovo and the Republic of Srpska in Bosnia and Herzegovina demonstrate this. So maybe to start off our today's podcast, Aleksandar, can you maybe explain a little bit about the current situation of the Serbian working class population? What are the central struggles and problems in Serbia? Can you maybe say something about the current developments in the region in a whole and explain the your party's view on them? And maybe also include a little bit of a explanation of what is happening in Kosovo and the Republic of Srpska at the present.
Yes, of course. First of all, congratulations, because you gave us very good introduce, and I'm not surprised that you have a lot of information about our region, and I don't know what can I say after your introductions. But the main problem in the Balkan is the NATO, because we couldn't speak about social justice in our region if we have occupation in our region. If we compare with some other historical period, we couldn't speak about social justice in the Second World War because in that time we have occupation. And what is the first task for the Balkanian people? The first task is that we need to fight against occupation, against the NATO. This is a main problem in the Serbia and our region. For example, Serbia is the only country in the Balkan, and Bosnia and Herzegovina also. These two countries are not a member of NATO, but NATO entire also in the Bosnia, like international missions and they peace building, etc., and something similar. And also they entire to Serbia. They occupied the south part of our country, Kosovo and Metohija. And they, in the end, in the Kosovo, US has the biggest bases in the Balkan, Bonstil. Also, Bosnia is a protectorate, and also NATO control these two countries. And NATO is a main problem because Western imperialism use their military bases, and Balkanian people became very poor after this process. They want to say that they want to develop this region, but practically they use our resource, our raw materials, and a lot of people emigrate from Balkanian country to the Western country. And this is the biggest problem because, for example, in our societies, in Balkan societies, we are nowadays we have a big problem with the working people because we don't have enough working people in our country and our countries, because a lot of people emigrated to Western countries or other countries, and our countries became empty. Also, Serbia and our neighbors have a problem with educated people, because when people finish their faculty or PhD or something else, they emigrate to the Western countries. And they have a plan that we stay the undeveloped country, and this is a problem. It's very interesting because you, in your introduction, you say Western Balkan, because during the 90s we were former Yugoslav region, but now we became Western Balkan. But it's very funny because imperialism started to use toponym of Nazis, like Western Balkans, Southeast Europe, and one classic teach us that class struggle. We have a class struggle in grammatic, but the problem for the working class and the working people, the main problem is the NATO. And a lot of countries in Balkan functions like protectorate. And when you have occupation, you can very easily to develop a clientelistic system. And this system developed, and they use gangster methods. And this is very problematic that you organize trade unions and something similar. Why? For example, if you want to organize trade unions in your factory or your company, you can very easily lose your job. Officially, trade unions, they collaborated with our bourgeoisie and with imperialist bourgeoisie, and also this is a problem because they want to save their position. For example, leaders of main trade unions in our countries, they have more money than some, I don't know, some bourgeoisie in the Western Europe. And this is also a problem because they became bourgeoisie. They have a big infrastructure. They rent their buildings, hotels, etc., because the biggest trade union in Serbia. They succeeded. Infrastructure from the socialist period, and they rent buildings in the center, in the every part in Serbia. They have buildings. They have hotels, etc., and they want to save position for their bureaucracy. Also, with other side, we have a problem for that we participated formal democratic process. Why? Because we have an undemocratical electional process in our country. Why? For example, if you want to participate in election, you need to gathering 10,000 signatures for circa 2 weeks, and the notarius need to put the stamp for every signatures, and person by person need to come to give you signature for your list. It's impossible for every list, but thanks to it, a rule party control electional process. This is the process from second counter-revolution from 2000 onwards. In 2001, when pro-Western opposition took power in our country, they changed electoral system because they want control situation in our country. And also all our governments from 2000 onwards, they led the pro-Western and pro-EU policy in our country. And all our governments from that, they want to that Serbia entire to European Union. But thanks to this policy, we in our country, our bourgeoisie destroyed our economy, destroy our financial sectors. They privatize, because from 2000 onwards, they privatize our financial sectors. They destroyed our industry. They started to implement Bologna system in education. They started to equalize military standards with NATO. They started with military exercise with NATO, and thanks to it, they destroyed our country. For example, we succeeded to survive during the 90s thanks to socialist industry and financial sectors, when Western countries brought a sanction to Yugoslavia. But sanctions couldn't destroy our industry and our economy. But after the counter-revolution, they destroyed everything. And one of the problems for the young people and young generations in our country, because they can't believe that they have any solution for their lives in our country. And this is because you don't have any correct jobs. You don't have you have a problem for accommodation, for education, etc., etc. And this is one of the reasons because people emigrate to the Western country. But the main problem, we say, the main problem is NATO, because after the NATO occupation, Serbia started with this process. What is this is similar situation with Bulgaria, Romania, etc. But we are not a member of NATO, and we have some of kind sovereignty in our country, and we could decide that we don't want to bring a sanction to Russia, for example. We can have a good relation. Our government can good relationship with for example, Cuba, Venezuela, and other socialist and progressive countries. And this is a reason because NATO and Western imperialism make a pressure for our country because, okay, Serbia is a small country, but they don't have that example for sovereign policy. And our government wants to lead openly pro-Western policy, and they led it, but they couldn't it because, for example, in last pollution told us from June that 70% people in Serbia against the sanction to Russia. And if you want to broad it, you can very big problem. For example, 47% people in Serbia against the European Union. But if European Union, one question was if European Union want that Serbia recognize Kosovo like independent country. In this case, 70% people in Serbia against the European Union, and also 86% against the NATO, against the membership of Serbia in NATO. And I want to say that our pro-Western government led the pro-Western policy, but people didn't want people don't want to support it. And this is the reason because they need to make a balance between people will and Western imperialism will. This is a problem because Western imperialism use separatists from the Kosovo, for example. Thanks for them. They want to make a pressure for our government that they need to cut sovereignty in our country. They told them, okay, if you don't want to bring this decision, we will make some small clashes in your territory, and this is the explanation. They led the policy. You had a very good explanation: divided and conquer, and this is a process in the Balkan. They made a lot of small countries, and they made that they are enemy with each others. And after that, they want to explain their explanation that they want to bring a reconciliation, they want to make a peace building agreements, etc., etc. And this is the problem. And our party says that we need to gathering all progressive forces in the Balkans and the Balkan region and our countries. That first step, we need to liberate our region from NATO, and after that we can fight for the socialist revolution. But of course, in every day we fight for the social justice for the working class, for the students. We have a lot of fights in every day for the everyday life. But the main problem in these historical circumstances in our region is the NATO, because we couldn't speak about any sovereignty and any potential socialist revolution if we have occupation.
Thank you. I think you draw a very good picture of what the main problematic conditions of the peoples of the Balkan are. Maybe you can, because it was somewhat in the news also in Germany, maybe you can explain a little bit more about the recent events in Kosovo and the Republic of Srpska. How do you see them, and what did actually happen there?
This is an eclatant example of occupation. For example, Bosnia and Herzegovina is a protectorate. After the Dayton Agreement, imperialists decided what is a solution for the Bosnia, and they want to destroy Republic of Srpska, because in nowadays Republic of Srpska have a good relationship with Russia, and they saw that Republic of Srpska and Serbs, that they are very problematic, and they can destabilize this region, and they can be Trojan horse in the Europe and the Balkans from Russia. And this is one of the step of pressure for Serbian sovereignty, because they want to make one pressure in Bosnia and the Republic of Srpska, and other they want to make pressure in Kosovo. And okay, it's Kurti, prime minister of so-called Kosovo. It's not the problem. This is funny when they want to explain, and our bourgeoisie won't explain that he is a problem, and that the US couldn't make agree with him. This is stupid. They can make any comma without US and European Union. They couldn't give any decision without European Union. But our bourgeoisie want to explain that the Albanians is a problem, that Kurti is a problem, and they are silent about Bonstil and NATO bases. And this is very interesting. We love to joke that we have two sides of one coin: professional Serbs, professional Serbs intellectuals, and anti-professional Serbs intellectuals. And they want to speak about both sides. They want to speak about mythology, but the point is that they gave argument of Western imperialism. They believe in the Western imperialism justice, and they don't want to say that Serbia is occupied by NATO. They don't. Okay, pro-Western, anti-Serbs intellectuals. It's a normal that they couldn't say, but so-called pro-Serbs intellectuals, conservatives, nationalists, they are silent about NATO. For them, it's the biggest problem is Albanians, but the NATO is not a problem. The NATO is not exist there, and sometimes abstractly they want to explain that US support them, but in the abstract level they want to say concrete that NATO occupied our country. And this is explanation that, okay, you don't want to bring a sanction to Russia. It's okay. We can make some clashes in Kosovo and Republic of Srpska, and after that we will make a pressure to you. This is a mantra, and also Turkey and other Western countries started to sell the weapon to Kosovo. They want to make Kosovo army from the former terrorist or so-called Liberation Army of Kosovo. They want to, with the Kosovo and Republic of Srpska, they want to make a bigger pressure to Serbia. My personal opinion that when they have a war in Ukraine, they couldn't make a big war in Balkan because they don't have opportunity. They gave everything for Ukraine, from weapons, etc., and they couldn't lead war in two fronts in the Europe. But they want to make clashes, and after that they want that they explain what is the point for their bases in Kosovo, Bosnia, and etc. But it's funny that our government wants to explain that NATO or KFOR they save Serbs in Kosovo, and this is explanation. We need to cooperate with them because they save our people there, but it's in the practice is something completely different. You can see what does mean vassal politics in our countries, and what does mean and what is the character of our governments, because they want to say, okay, we don't want to have a war with NATO, and this is the reason because we need to cooperate with them. This is explanation. There are partners. In the previously time during the 90s, it existed some misunderstanding, but today we need to cooperate with them. Political situation is changing, and after that we need to cooperate with them because they this is interest for our people. But what is situation in the field? The situation that Serbs from Kosovo emigrated to the Serbia or other countries, and also Albanians emigrated to Kosovo. Kosovo is the Kosovo has a problem. They have a in Kosovo took a power mafia thanks to Western imperialism, and they control everything. For example, they have a hydroelectric in one city in Obilic, and this hydroelectric can give electricity for Serbia, with the Kosovo, Vojvodina, and whole Serbia. But in Kosovo, they have a problem with electricity because they sold their electricity for other countries, and also they have a big problem with the trafficking. They have a problem with drugs and something similar. And this is explanation that nowadays in Kosovo exists a mafia regime controlled by US imperialism and NATO. And this is a situation in Kosovo and Bosnia.
Thank you for your explanations. I think it already demonstrated how much today is the influence on the Balkan countries by the NATO intervention in the 90s. Maybe can you further or more in detail explain the background of the conflicts in the 90s? What do you see as the main dynamics which led toward those conflicts, and how can you maybe you can also describe the proceeding of NATO? How did they act during the 90s? And yeah, you already mentioned events like the Dayton Accords concerning the Bosnia conflict. Yes.
During the 90s, when after the contra-revolutionary process in our country, they wanted to destroy Yugoslavia like independent countries, because from our south borders to our western borders to in Yugoslavia existed only one army, Yugoslav Liberation Army. It was only army in Yugoslavia, and it was a problem for NATO, because if you have sovereignty, you have a problem. And in our socialism construction existed a lot of mistake, but it was a better solution for majority people than counter-revolution and capitalism in nowadays. But after the Second World War, Nazi collaborators and other anti-communist forces emigrated to the Western country. And thanks to BND, your security service in Germany, and CIA and French security service, etc., they organize a lot of terrorist actions in socialist Yugoslavia. During the 90s, when counter-revolutionary process started, when they import so-called human rights and democracy and democratical pluralism, a lot of fascist groups from every side, a lot of so-called political immigrants, but they weren't political immigrants. They were terrorists, fascists, and something similar. And Western imperialism used there for their aims, and they come back to Yugoslavia, and they founded a lot of political parties, or they joined to the other political forces, and they radicalized people in our countries. For example, in September of 1990, in Croatia, pollution told us that 86% of Croatians against the independence of Croatia. In the May of 1991, 86% of Croatians support independence of Croatia. I want to say that they are very fastly use the media, etc., and they want to radicalize people for the war. And Serbs, it's in the first Yugoslavia, political elites in Serbia, they thought that they are like a Piedmont in Italy. That is a role of Serbia, that need to unify Yugoslavia, and that thanks for the Serbs, we liberated our brothers in other regions. Serbs from Serbia during the 90s and to the other regions wanted to save Yugoslavia, because this is a logical explanation. Serbs can live in the one country, and it was a reason. But Serbs was constitutional people in the Croatian constitution in socialist Yugoslavia and socialist Croatia. But counter-revolutionary leader Franjo Tudjman and first president of independence of Croatia during the 90s, he eradicated Serbs from constitution. And it was a good for the war, because memory of the Second World War started to come back. They started to use emblems from the Second World War, from Ustasha, from the fascist, from regime, and the problem from Serbs from Croatia, they started to use monarchy symbols and collaboration symbols. Western imperialism gave weapons. First in Slovenia started war, and this war, after the 4 days, this war stopped. US told for Yugoslav government, we didn't want to support any intervention of Yugoslav. And if you make some interventions, you will have a problem with us. And aircraft ships came to Adriatic Sea, etc., etc. And in this time, analytic says, okay, we know what does mean. We couldn't have a war with NATO with one side, and with other side civil war in our country. And they and Yugoslav army withdraw their military from Croatia and from Slovenia, and they withdraw their military bases for Serb sides because Serbs support Yugoslavia, and if we have a war in Yugoslavia, we withdraw army when we couldn't have a problem with our background. The main problem was NATO. NATO wanted to occupy our territory, and I told you when I started to explain the process in Yugoslavia that Yugoslav army had control in our territory, but in Slovenia is a member of NATO today, and they made the standard with the NATO. Croatia is a member of NATO. Macedonia is, and Montenegro also. NATO entire to the Serbia or Kosovo and Bosnia. And I want to explain you that NATO underpinned civil war in Yugoslavia. And after that, they want to explain that they need to stay here because you have 3 savage tribes, and these tribes wants to kill each other, etc., and they need to stay here because they need to give us reconciliation, peace building process, and something similar. But Serbia and Montenegro made the short Yugoslavia. They still exist in Yugoslavia, and in this Yugoslavia should be nucleus for other Yugoslavia and reunification with other countries. But what was the problem for the NATO? Because during the 90s, our government didn't have any arrangement with International Monetary Fund and World Bank. We didn't want to use Western credits, Western interests. We didn't want to privatize our financial sectors. And it was eclatant example what they want to give us sanction, and they want to explain that couldn't have any alternative in the Europe because it was a time of neoliberalism triumph and something similar. And it was a reason because they want to destroy our country. I would like to say that when decided to, in 1995, after the Dayton agreement, when withdraw sanction to Yugoslavia, after that Yugoslavia has a very big economical growth. For example, in 1996 and 1997, it was 7% of growing of our economy, and Yugoslavia started to rebuild your economy, and it was easily because you have the socialist infrastructure in this time. You have there exists big industrial complex and other something similar things. But they say, okay, we don't want to have example of any alternatives. And after that, they decided to destroy and occupy Yugoslavia. After that, they organized the counter-revolutionary process in 2000, and this is very easily. They want to occupy our territory, and they wanted to make society like nowadays.
Also, because you mentioned the BND acting with Croatia and Slovenia, do you think that Germany had also different interests in the beginning of the conflicts in Yugoslavia to then USA, or do you perceive NATO as a unitary actor in those times?
Okay, during the 70s, 80s, Germany was one of the center for the anti-Yugoslav people, and they had a business in Germany. The BND gave them money, weapons, logistical supporters, and other things. And also they wanted to destroy Yugoslavia, but US was during the 90s. US, when they decided that they need to do it, they did it, and I mean the other Western countries. For example, Spain was the first countries who recognized Slovenia and Croatia. But nowadays, our bourgeoisie wants to explain that they are very big friends to Serbia because they don't want to recognize Kosovo. But I want to say that US was a leader of this process, because you are very similar country, like in constitution, like Bosnia, because if you in US, if want to change your chancellor, they could do it. They did it in Bosnia, for example, in Republika Srpska during the 90s. And in the war in Ukraine, we could see who is the boss. The US is the boss in the Western imperialism, and we couldn't see any sovereignty in policy in European Union and etc. Because if you brought a sanction to Russia, it's unlogical for European economy. But they did it because US told them that they did it. It's a similar process for Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia was a good exercise for the war against the Russia, because we are very small paragraph when NATO decided to push their borders to border to Russia. We are very, very small. This is very tragedy for our people, for people in former Yugoslavia. But it was what they wanted to occupy our region. They want to make the front against the Russia, and this is explanation. This is a context of civil war in Yugoslavia. We couldn't speak about civil war in Yugoslavia if you want to say that it's some island in the world. No, during the 90s it existed 40 wars in the world. We need to understand what does mean context. NATO needs to explain what NATO needs to exist. It is explanation, and they find very flourished place, unfortunately, in our countries. But for your question, US was a major boss in this war and in the process of Yugoslavia, and also nowadays they are a major boss for every conflict in the Balkan region. And when they decided that this conflict needs to stop, after that our bourgeoisie governments made some agreement with each others. Their major boss in our region.
I think that also in Germany there were a lot of propaganda campaigns, and still today the role of the Serbian nationalism is often really exaggerated in this whole process. And the crimes against the Serbs in the different countries are really not often mentioned when the bourgeois thinkers in Germany speak about this whole process. But I would also like to ask you, how would you see the rise of somewhat Serbian, also nationalist government under Milosevic, because you also described the influence of the imperialist countries when it comes to the Croatian nationalist movement, for example. How do you see the rise of the Serbian nationalist movement in those times?
This is a mantra. For everything is guilty Slobodan Milosevic and Serbian nationalism and the project of big Serbia. This is, but you can't find, okay, Milosevic, he wasn't, for our standards, he wasn't communist. He was a leader of League of Communists of Serbia. And after that, he became a leader of and father of Socialist Party of Serbia. And he was classical Titoist cadre. And his party succeeded this political line. They believe Titoism propaganda explained that we have sovereignty, and they believe in it. It was their ideology. And he was a banker, and he knows if you sold your banker systems and if you sold your state banks, they know what does mean. You can't speak about sovereignty if you couldn't control your financial systems. This is propaganda and mantra. They need to explain for your public opinion what they want to let the war against the Milosevic, Saddam Hussein, etc., etc. When Milosevic decided to make agreement in Dayton, after that in Western they started to speak positive about Milosevic. They spoke that he is a factor of stability in Balkans. After the only 3 years, they started to speak something completely different. But after the counter-revolution and during the 90s, a lot of reactionary forces started to work in our country, in Serbia, and a lot of nationalists started to work. But this is process of democratical pluralism. During the Yugoslavia period, these people spent time in the prison, or when they lived in US, Germany, French. Serbs nationalists prefer French and US. And during the 90s, they come back to Serbia. Why? They want to speak about human rights and democracy. For example, monarchist Chetniks movements, their leaders emigrated to French and US. And who controlled them? Who gave money for them, etc., etc. But during the 90s, when during the 90s, Western imperialism supported separatist imperialism separatist nationalism in our countries. In our country, why? Because Serbs nationalist project wasn't good for them. Why? Because this project speak about Yugoslavia. Serbs knows that I think Serbs elites knows that you couldn't speak about big Serbia because you don't have any ethnical clean situation. And also Serbs nationalists support Yugoslavia because in this context Serbs could live in one state. But it's not a function, it wasn't function for the Western imperialism because they want to make very small countries. It is easily for control. And in our government, Serbs nationalists didn't have any, during the 90s, I speak during the 90s, they didn't have any control. And if you heard Milosevic, for example, you can't find any nationalistic sentences or chauvinistic or something else. They spoke like during the 90s, like during the end of 80s. In 1987, what they said, in that time, it was political pragmatism. But he repeated it in 1997. It wasn't political pragmatism because in that time we didn't have multicultural Yugoslavia. And he believed in this context. And if you heard him, you can't find any nationalist sentences. But he was an enemy against the Western imperialism, and it is explanation what he need to be evil. And this is very good example. What does mean Western propaganda? And explanation for everything is Slobodan Milosevic and Serbian nationalism destroyed Yugoslavia. After that, you can say the problem existed in Croatia with Tudjman and in Bosnia with Alija Izetbegovic and something similar. But the main reason was Slobodan Milosevic and Serbs nationalism. And after the Contra-Revolution, they made a lot of money for so-called no-governmental organization for a lot of projects. Then when they speak about reconciliation and something similar, they gathering a lot of scientists that they want to explain what it was a war context of war in Yugoslavia. But they are not objectively example. Why? Because they are propagandists. They are not the scientists. They speak only about Western propaganda, and they need to repeat it mantra. And Western imperialism gave them money for it. Of course, they opened a lot of cultural centers in our countries, no governmental organization, etc. They made a lot of exhibitions, made a lot of films, and they wanted to convince to young people that they accepted their mantra. And this is very clever. Why? Because if you are anti-nationalist, if you want to be progressive, you can say, okay, I want to accept. If you are young people, you don't know anything, they are anti-nationalist and they gave me job. I think that I work good things, and this is reason how can they produce new cadres in our countries.
Thank you. It's really interesting for me as well. If you look at the history in Yugoslavia from the 90s, it's really imperialism in a nutshell, somewhat. You know, it's all the instruments of imperialism that are so devastatingly enforced. Like, as you said, the NGOs working in culturally and infiltrating liberal agendas, the structural adjustment programs, privatizing and IMF loans, and of course the military intervention. And it's all there, you know. It's all there, and it's all instruments that we can like color revolutions. Also, it's all instruments that are repeatedly can be repeatedly is seen all over the world. And this is why I think there's so much to learn from the young history of Yugoslavia, especially for us in Germany, because Germany played such a prominent role in all of this process of fragmentation and using kind of nationalistic forces to separate the people of Yugoslavia. And as you just said, also the propaganda, it was huge here in the 90s, and with the beginning of the Kosovo war that they did, it was the first interventional war of Germany after the Second World War, and they really had to push this agenda with a great deal of propaganda. You know, the whole Green Party that came from a peace movement earlier in the 70s and 80s. They were the ones enforcing this war, and they had to use this propaganda idea of big Serbian nationalism and so on, and supporting the goodwill of national sovereignty of the Croatian people, of the Bosnian people. And this is, of course, it's bullshit. Obviously, has nothing to do with self-determination, as we as communists know from also a Leninist background, the self-determination of nations. Yeah, it's.
We couldn't speak. We love to say that we couldn't speak about self-determination if imperialists supports it. It's not the will of the people. It is the will of the imperialism. And one classic explain it in the national and colonial question. And this is very easy. If why imperialism want to support some progressive forces? They want to have some. If we live in a time of the profit, why do want to give money for something if you don't have a profit in the future? And I think that classics of Marxism explain us what is the logic of imperialism. But what is funny, when you gave us very good introduction for discussion. In our countries, Western propaganda, we are governmental organization and other cultural center controlled by Western countries. They made the focus on the 90s. They don't want to make a focus on socialism in Yugoslavia. Why? Because they want to explain that they made a revisionism of history. They supported it, but they want to explain that in Yugoslavia we have a multicultural society or something similar, and we were during the Yugoslav period we were small European Union. This is a mantra explanation. And they want to say that we in that time cooperate with Western countries, etc., etc. We have open borders and something similar. They didn't want to speak about protests in Yugoslavia, but the focus during the 80s, Milosevic took power, and after that he wanted to make a big Serbia, etc., etc. But why? Because this is a very important decade against the imperialism, and this is Yugoslavia was only example who fought against the imperialism in the Europe, and this is a reason because they made the focus for this decade, because in that time we had a war in Europe against the NATO, and this is explanation because they made the focus for tyranny in our country in this decade, because they want to explain that you couldn't have any sovereignty. If you want to have it, you are evil. This is one of the explanation. You couldn't have any alternative. You couldn't have any example for it. And of course, during the Milosevic period, our party was an opposition party. We had a lot of problem with him and his government, but we are communist, and we need to make a picture objectively. And what does mean what came in our country after Milosevic, and this is important.
Okay, I think what you told us also demonstrated pretty much the significance of all those processes in Yugoslavia. So I think it's perfect to now go on to the current global developments. How do you see the NATO aggressions against Russia, and what it means to the global proletariat, and how must we as communist and anti-imperialist forces respond to it?
During the 90s, NATO started to push their borders, and they wanted to surround Russia. And if you don't have any political knowledge or something similar, you can see a map and you can see where is a NATO basis. And if you surrounded Russia, what is the reason? What did they do? What is the reason? And if they took Ukraine, NATO, if they took Ukraine, Russia after that, they didn't have any national borders against the NATO. Logically, Caucasus and Carpathian mountains in the borders of the Russia. You know that you are from Germany, and Fritz Fischer explained what does mean Russia. What does that is a Russia local power if they don't have Ukraine, Baltic countries, and Belarus, and the new powers like US use something from the 19th century, but we think that that is important that Russia defeated NATO in Ukraine. This is important for anti-imperialist struggle. That is, it is not known that we support Putin regime in Russia. Putin is anti-communist. Russia is a capitalist country. we couldn't say that when Putin defeated NATO in Ukraine, that after that we didn't have any contradictions in the world. After that, it will be everything is fine. No, but in this context, for anti-imperialism struggle, for anti-imperialist coalition, is very important that communists support Russians in a war against the Ukraine. Why? For example, we want to know what does mean dialectical method. What does mean dialectical moment? In this moment, every progressive forces in the world and socialist countries supported Russia against the Ukraine. Why African country decided to support it Russian? Why Venezuela, Cuba, etc., Latin American country supported Russia? This is very important for the dialectical moment, because if Russia defeated NATO in Ukraine, what does it mean? That US lose hegemony in the world, and this is very important. For example, what was the tactic of the communists during the Second World War? Communists made the anti-fascist coalition with a very big anti-communist Churchill and Roosevelt. But who was the biggest evil in that time? In that time, was the biggest evil was Hitler and Mussolini and Japan. And in this historical moment, the biggest evil is NATO and US. And this is explanation because communists need to support Russia against the NATO. What is also is important, this war can explain us what is the tragedy of counter-revolution in the Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. Who killed each other in Ukraine? What is the difference between Ukraine and the Russians? This is the same people. They have a same culture, same or similar language, etc. But this is something Western imperialism made something similar like in our country, divided and conquer. What is the reason? We need to know that war in Ukraine started in 2014 after the coup d'etat in Maidan, and after that, Ukraine started with the war against the people in Donbass. In Odessa, they made very big criminals. They burned the people in the trade unions buildings, etc. And after that, people started with rebellion against the Kiev. In that time, Western media silent about it, and we didn't know anything about media about war in Ukraine, but they started to speak about it after the 24th February. And we need to know what does mean context. What is the context of this war? The context is that after the counter-revolution in Ukraine, pro-Western forces wanted to radicalize Ukraine identity, and they started to celebrate the Nazist and fascist leaders and collaborators during the Second World War. And a lot of leaders like Stepan Bandera emigrated to Germany, like a lot of leaders from our country emigrated to Germany and other Western countries after the Second World War, and they started to use their ideology to radicalize people against the Russia. And this is the point. And they radicalized these people. And what after the coup d'etat in 2040, who organized this coup d'etat, and what it was the reason? in this time, president of Ukraine, Yanukovych, he had two choices between European EU agreement and with Russia, and Russia gave them better solution. But after that, US organized coup d'etat, and we have a situation that after that, military junta with the fascists and liberals took power, and they started that radicalized people. And after the 8 years, they a new generation grew up, and ideological apparatus worked very good in the school. They changed the history. They destroyed the monuments of Lenin, Red Army soldiers, etc., etc. And after that, they want to destroy people rebellion in the Donbas and Lugansk, and they banned Russian language in Ukraine. And after that, Russia needs to start to fight in Ukraine. I want to repeat that is very important for anti-imperialist struggle, and we can see what does mean unlogical fight in Ukraine. The war is with, if we speak about aggressors, the war is finishing Ukraine. Every person who can say that Russia will win in this war. We have situation that 14 million people emigrated from Ukraine. 2,050 people died in military service in Ukraine. And nowadays, when Ukraine started with catastrophic counter-offensive, we can see that they fight for the interest of Westerns because they want to weaken the Russia. And this is explanation. The war for the strategic, for the logical, for the wrestlers is a finish. But Western gave weapons because they want to prolong this war. We can see in the practice what does mean how they fight for the people. People die in every day. They gave them forbidden bombs and something similar with depleting uranium and something similar because they want to radicalize this war. They think if they gave for Ukraine forbidden weapons, bombs, and something similar, that they can radicalize Russians, and after that they can radicalize people in this region. And we can see what does mean propaganda in this war. And we know, and people in our country knows that we were first step for the war against the Russia. And the biggest problem in contemporary time is the NATO, and NATO and US have a hegemony in the world. And this is important that the anti-imperialist coalition defeated NATO. And after that, when we have a sovereignty, when we live in the world without NATO, we can fight for the socialist justice, and we can speak about communist revolution. I will give you historical example. In the Balkan or Eastern Europe, when we defeated the Nazis, after that we can have opportunity to build better society. And this is we can understand the context of the war. And we want to say that this war started in 2014, and who underpinned this war, who was guilty for this war, and if we know it, it's logically what anti-imperialist forces need to support. Why anti-imperialism forces need to support Russia in this war.
I think we're coming to the near end of this podcast. We already have taken quite some time from you, but maybe in the end, can you explain what is the effect of what is happening in like the global arena of imperialism with the aggression of NATO against Russia? What is the effect of the peoples of Yugoslavia and Serbia? Is there some kind? You've already been talking a little bit about the like opinion of the Serbian people, for example, that there's some kind of anti-NATO sentiment which is still quite strong. Is it growing in the context of this war, or is there room for you and your party to really build on this kind of anti-NATO sentiment? And what else are maybe also political effects of this war in Ukraine to Serbia and the region of former Yugoslavia?
For progressive forces in our country, this situation has a positive for our political stance. Why? The anti-imperialist struggle is growing, and people support it. And also anti-fascist and anti-Nazist struggle. This war is very important for anti-Nazist and anti-fascist struggle. Why? For example, we have in the history we had a problem with small football hooligans and pro-Nazis group. But when Russia started with denazification in Ukraine, they disappeared. It started to be unpopular that you support some fascist or Nazist group, and they stopped with destroyed partisan movements, etc. And in the our context, we can see that this is very important of denazification of society. I mean, you can see in our society that this group are disappeared because it's very unpopular. If you say that you support some Nazist regime, some collaborationist forces, and something similar, you can say, aha, you support Kiev, you support Zelensky, and this is, aha, I can't believe you are crazy. They killed the children and something else, something similar. I can't believe it. And this is very, very unpopular. But in the global situation, we can see that imperialism made provocation in Taiwan and in North Korea and Korea Peninsula. They made a lot of military exercise between US, Japan, and South Korea. We can see that they made a lot of provocation in every corner in the world. But after the war in Ukraine, the world is not the same. During the 90s, US and NATO had a hegemony, and they control everything. But today we can see that situation in Middle East is changing, that the process of the dollarization is a new process, and that they and US couldn't stop it. And this is very important for anti-imperialist struggle, because if they don't have control, financial control, they will lose the power, and they lose the power. They are not the same power like during the 90s, and this is very important things. And the process, we can see that thanks to it, the process in the Middle East, South Asia, Africa, and Latin America are changing, and it can help us in Europe that we can change situation, and we will have opportunity to fight to better social conditions and better world. And this is a explanation for a global scale.
Well, thanks a lot, Aleksandar. It was a great pleasure to be able to talk to you. I think there's a huge need in this kind of dangerous situation that is also like in danger of an increasing war by the imperialist countries. There's a great need for the communists to strengthen their internationalist ties.
Absolutely.
And we're very excited and looking forward to continue our exchange on the assessment of the world today and the changes and how we as communists worldwide are able to counter these imperialist aggressions. So we're very interested to continue this kind of conversation in whatever different levels. But for now, thanks a lot for your time and for your input. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
Hvala.
Nema na čemu.
In the end, just before we end this episode, let me shortly give a short note on our Congress that we're doing in October, from 6th to 8th of October in Berlin, under the title of Anti-Imperialism, Class Struggles and National Liberation. Today, we also want to really continue this kind of conversation of understanding the imperialist system and the need for anti-imperialist struggle, how the lines of progressive forces need to be set. So this will be one point where we can continue this conversation. Thanks a lot, and we'll meet again.
Yes, sure. Bye, goodbye.
Thank you, bye.
Kommunistische Organisation. Podcast.